you going to meet the neighbor I was telling you about?
Oh, you mean my next door neighbor? Only lives 50 miles from me. Don't lose count.
Hollywood has always been a place where the brightest lights hide the darkest truths, and few stars shone brighter than Elizabeth Taylor. She lived a life drenched in diamonds, scandal, and legendary love affairs. But behind the glamour was a woman who carried secrets that could shatter the glossy facade of Tinseltown. And when death crept closer, Taylor chose not to leave this world without unburdening herself. The truth she confessed about Rock Hudson wasn't just another Hollywood story. It was the kind of revelation that rewrote everything fans thought they knew about their friendship and loyalty to one another. The making of a Hollywood survivor. Elizabeth Taylor may have become one of Hollywood's leading women, but before the diamonds, the scandals, and the legendary love affairs, she was simply Elizabeth Rosamond Taylor, a child born into privilege, beauty, and a world already touched by art and influence. She entered the world on February 27, 1932, at Heathwood, the family's elegant home tucked inside the leafy quiet of Hampstead Garden suburb in northwest London. From the very beginning, she carried two identities, both British and American, thanks to her parents, Frances Lynn Taylor, an art dealer with a keen eye, and Sarah Southern, a former stage actress whose roots in Arkansas City, Kansas, could not have felt farther from the brilliance of London. The Taylors had made their move across the Atlantic in 1929, opening an art gallery on Bond Street. Their circle was anything but ordinary. Elizabeth grew up surrounded by painters like Augustus John and Laura Knight, and political figures such as Colonel Victor Cazalet, who would step into her life as more than just a family friend. He became her unofficial godfather, shaping her worldview in ways that would linger long after childhood. At home, her mother's strict Christian Science beliefs set the tone, and Elizabeth was enrolled at Byron House School, a Montessori program in Highgate, where her first lessons in discipline and individuality took root. But just as her world was beginning to take shape, life happened. By 1939, the storm clouds over Europe grew too dark, and the Taylors made a decision that would forever change Elizabeth's destiny. Joseph P. Kennedy, then the U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom, urged Francis Taylor to take his family back to America before war broke out. Sarah didn't hesitate. In April of that year, she boarded the SS Manhattan with Elizabeth and her brother Howard, making the long voyage to the United States and settling briefly with her father in Pasadena, California. Francis remained behind to close the London gallery, but by December he too crossed the Atlantic, reuniting the family and opening a new gallery in Los Angeles. From that point, the Taylors' lives began to take form in Hollywood. After a short stay with friends in Pacific Palisades, they moved into Beverly Hills, an address that would soon become synonymous with both opportunity and temptation. Elizabeth and Howard enrolled at Hawthorne School, stepping into an American childhood that would soon be interrupted by the call of the silver screen. And it wasn't long before that call became impossible to ignore. Building an empire on screen. In California, talks about Elizabeth Taylor's extraordinary beauty began to circulate almost immediately. Everyone noticed her eyes, an impossible shade of blue that seemed to flirt with violet, fringed by dark double eyelashes born of a rare genetic twist. The world saw a girl, but those who looked closely saw a force. Her mother, Sarah, initially resisted the idea of her daughter stepping into the glare of Hollywood. But the outbreak of war in Europe had closed the door on returning to England. Suddenly, the film industry wasn't just an opportunity. It was a path to survival in a new world, a way for Elizabeth to anchor herself in American society. Frances Taylor's Beverly Hills Gallery had already attracted Hollywood clients, supported by gossip columnist Hedda Hopper's glowing endorsements. Through a combination of these connections and a school friend's father, young Elizabeth found herself auditioning for both Universal Pictures and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in early 1941. Both studios offered contracts, but Sarah chose Universal, setting Elizabeth on the first step of a journey that would blur the line between childhood and legend. April 1941 marked the start of her Universal contract, landing her a small role in There's One Born Every Minute. But Hollywood was rarely kind to those who didn't fit the mold. After a year, the contract ended, with the studio declaring that Elizabeth Had nothing, her eyes are too old, and she doesn't have the face of a child. Unlike Shirley Temple or Judy Garland, Elizabeth didn't project the doll-like innocence the studios craved. Looking back, she said she must have frightened adults simply by being herself, direct, unfiltered, and unafraid. Fortune, however, has a way of turning on a dime. In late 1942, MGM producer Samuel Marks, a family acquaintance, arranged a test for Lassie Come Home, a film seeking a child with an English accent. That trial contract blossomed into a 7-year deal, and soon Elizabeth was taking small, uncredited roles in Jane Eyre and The White Cliffs of Dover, honing her craft while the world watched quietly. At just 12, Elizabeth landed her first starring role in National Velvet, portraying a determined girl intent on competing in the all-male Grand National. It was a role that required skill, courage, and a presence far beyond her years. MGM held her to every detail, insisting she wear braces, lose 2 baby teeth, and practice horseback riding relentlessly. They wanted to change her hair, her eyebrows, and even her name to Virginia. Her parents refused, a rare stand of defiance in a studio-driven world. When the film hit theaters on Christmas 1944, audiences were captivated. Critics praised her grace, her beauty, and her undeniable screen presence. National Velvet was no mere debut, it was a declaration. But stardom came at a price. MGM treated her as a living, breathing product. Her childhood ended under studio lights. Days were regimented with classes and filming. Evenings were consumed with dancing, singing, and memorizing lines. Following the triumph of National Velvet, MGM renewed her contract, showering her with $750 a week and pushing her into further projects. Minor roles in Courage of Lassie, books, paper dolls, and coloring books featuring her likeness. By 15, MGM was shaping her image as a normal teenager, part actress, part manufactured American girl, throwing photo shoots and publicity campaigns into overdrive, carefully juxtaposing her innocence with emerging sophistication. Her adolescent years were a blur of films like Cynthia, Life with Father, and A Date with Judy, each role nudging her further along the tightrope between child star and emerging adult icon. Julia Misbehaves brought commercial success, while Little Women cemented her as Hollywood's true sapphire, gracing Time's cover as the leader of the next generation of stars. Transitioning to adult roles was no easy feat. At 16, she filmed Conspirator, delayed until 1950 due to its sensitive political content. That year, she married hotel heir Conrad Nicky Hilton Jr. in a wedding orchestrated for publicity, dovetailing perfectly with her starring role in Father of the Bride, 1950. The film's box office triumph only cemented MGM's strategy. Elizabeth's personal life and professional image were inseparable, a combined spectacle for public consumption. Critically, she found her footing with A Place in the Sun, a role that demanded real acting, not simply being herself. Cast as a spoilt socialite who ensnares a man in a web of desire and tragedy, Elizabeth's performance proved she could inhabit complexity, sensuality, and emotional depth in equal measure. Critics hailed her transformation. Audiences took notice. Hollywood was finally seeing the woman behind the violet eyes. Yet MGM never let Elizabeth Taylor forget its grip. Her career was soaring, her face gracing magazine covers, yet every personal choice divorcing Conrad Hilton, marrying Michael Wilding, bearing a child only tightened the studio's hold. She was loaned to Paramount for Elephant Walk, cast in historical dramas she despised, and forced to extend her contract to make up for maternity leave. Every triumph, every carefully posed smile, and every frame captured on film was orchestrated, polished, and commodified. Elizabeth Taylor was no longer just a girl with extraordinary eyes. She had become a jewel, dazzling under the unblinking glare of Hollywood while quietly honing the steel that would carry her through the storms ahead. By the mid-1950s, the tides of the American film industry were shifting. Television was rising, studios were producing fewer films, and the demand for quality over quantity opened doors for those ready to seize them. Taylor was ready. After persistent lobbying, she won the lead in Giant, a sprawling drama of wealth, power, and family co-starring Rock Hudson and the late James Dean. The filming in Marfa, Texas was grueling. Director George Stevens clashed with her at every turn, attempting to break her will and mold her into something more pliable. Illness slowed production, and Dean's tragic death just days after filming left Taylor to shoot reaction scenes while grappling with grief. Yet when Giant premiered, it was a triumph. Critics singled her out. Variety praised her as surprisingly clever, and the Manchester Guardian called her an astonishing revelation of unsuspected gifts. Even without an Oscar nomination, Taylor had arrived as a serious actress. The pinnacle of her career and the stormiest period of her life arrived with Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Fresh from divorcing Wilding and marrying producer Mike Todd, Taylor faced devastation when Todd died in a plane crash just 2 weeks into filming. Yet studio pressure and financial necessity forced her back on set after only 3 weeks. She later admitted that in a way, she became Maggie the Cat. Acting became the only way to function amidst heartbreak. Adding fuel to the fire, her affair with singer Eddie Fisher, already married to the beloved Debbie Reynolds, catapulted her into scandal. The media labeled her a homewrecker, and MGM, ever calculating, used her notoriety to sell the film, plastering her image in a provocative slip on posters. Cat grossed $10 million domestically, and Taylor's performance drew glowing reviews, earning both Academy and BAFTA nominations. Her final obligation to MGM, Butterfield 8, cast her as a high-class call girl. Taylor despised the role, but the studio understood that public perception would make it impossible for audiences to separate the character from the actress. She negotiated conditions, filming in New York, casting Eddie Fisher sympathetically, and the gamble paid off. Butterfield 8 was a hit, grossing $18 million in rentals worldwide, and earned Taylor her first Academy Award for Best Actress, cementing her transformation from child star to Hollywood legend. By the time she stepped onto the set of Cleopatra, Taylor was more than a star. She was a force of nature. The historical epic, shot in lavish Todd AO and filmed across England and Rome, made her the first actress ever paid $1 million for a role, with an additional 10% of the film's gross. Yet the production was chaos incarnate, costly delays, extravagant sets, and a near-fatal bout of pneumonia that required a tracheotomy threatened to halt filming. Director changes, location shifts, and a high-profile affair with co-star Richard Burton made the headlines worldwide. Cleopatra became the most talked-about movie of its time, a box office phenomenon, yet its record-breaking cost nearly bankrupted 20th Century Fox. Critics were harsh, slamming Taylor's weight and her voice and comparing her unfavorably to her classically trained British co-stars. Taylor herself later called it a low point in her career, lamenting that the studio had excised the scenes she believed revealed the true heart of her character. And yet, as the cameras rolled and the chaos swirled, Taylor's personal life was already scripting its own dramatic tale. Love that burned hot and crashed hard. Famous for her whirlwind romances, Elizabeth Taylor's love life read like a Hollywood epic in its own right. 10 engagements, 8 marriages, and scandal trailing her like a shadow. She was only 18 when she married hotel heir Conrad Nicky Hilton Jr., who would later become the great-uncle of Paris Hilton. Their romance ignited in the sultry glow of a Sunset Boulevard nightclub, a spark that quickly turned into a blazing Hollywood spectacle. MGM orchestrated the wedding like a film set, casting young actresses as bridesmaids to lend extra glamour. Hilton, like his future great niece, was notorious for his party boy ways, yet he attempted to impress the starlet by leaving his wild nights behind. But the illusion didn't last. Before the couple even returned from their 14-week European honeymoon, Hilton's temper turned violent. Taylor suffered abuse so severe it caused a miscarriage, and whispers of an affair between Hilton and his stepmother, Zsa Zsa Gabor, added betrayal to heartbreak. Taylor fled, filing for divorce in 1951 on grounds of extreme cruelty. The storm of her first marriage gave way to the calm of a second. On the set of Ivanhoe, Taylor met British actor Michael Wilding, 20 years her senior, and found the quiet stability she had craved. They married in London's Caxton Hall, had 2 sons, and shared a marriage defined more by companionship than passion. It lasted 5 years, long enough for Taylor to confess, years later, that she had fallen for the calm and quiet and security of friendship. For a woman who had survived the chaos of Hilton, it was a rare taste of normalcy. Then came Mike Todd, the man often described as her first true love. The Hollywood mogul swept Taylor off her feet with gifts worthy of royalty: a Renoir painting, a mink coat, and a diamond bracelet. On her 25th birthday, in a hooded white gown, she walked down the aisle in Acapulco, Mexico, her 29-carat diamond, nicknamed the Ice Skating Rink, sparkling in the sun. Bliss followed swiftly with the birth of their daughter, Liza. Taylor later wrote that under Todd's exuberant, adoring care, her self-esteem and sense of self soared. But the fairy tale was brutally short-lived. Just 1 year later, Todd died in a plane crash, leaving her a widow with an 8-month-old baby. In what became one of Hollywood's most infamous scandals, Taylor soon married singer Eddie Fisher, Mike Todd's best man, and the husband of her close friend Debbie Reynolds. Their affair, born from shared grief, enraged the public. Taylor was branded a homewrecker, Fisher a betrayer. Yet Taylor clung to Todd's diamond, accepting an engagement bracelet from Fisher as a delicate acknowledgement of her past love. They married in a Las Vegas synagogue in 1959, but their union crumbled when passion pulled her toward a co-star she could not resist. That co-star was Richard Burton, and what followed was cinematic in its intensity. Their affair on the set of Cleopatra was electric, a collision of desire and fame that Joseph Mankiewicz described as like being locked in a cage with two tigers. Paparazzi chronicled every stolen moment. Yachts, late-night shopping trips on Rome's Via Veneto, and even the Pope weighed in, condemning their romance as erotic vagrancy and an insult to the sanctity of marriage. Unfazed, Taylor and Burton married days after her divorce from Fisher. Their love was as lavish and volatile as their public image suggested, fueled by alcohol, infidelity, and diamond gifts, including the iconic $1 million Taylor Burton diamond. Though their 10-year marriage ended in divorce, they reunited in Botswana for a second ceremony, only to part again. Even so, Taylor never wavered in her devotion, later admitting that Burton remained her great love. After his death in 1984, she revealed a letter he had sent her pleading for another chance. A different kind of romance arrived with John Warner, a senator-to-be she met on a blind date for a Queen Elizabeth II dinner at the British Embassy. She was enchanted by his all-American charm, daydreaming of a ranch life with wild horses under the vast sky. Reality, however, intruded. Politics demanded conformity. Warner insisted she sell her yacht, pack away her diamonds, and retreat from the spotlight to suit voters' sensibilities. The glamorous freedom Taylor loved was replaced by the monotony of political life, triggering depression and deepening her struggles with alcohol and opiates, eventually leading her to rehab. Taylor's final marriage defied expectation entirely. Larry Fortensky, a construction worker 20 years her junior whom she met at the Betty Ford Rehab Center, became her 8th husband. Their wedding was pure Hollywood spectacle. Michael Jackson lent them Neverland Ranch. Taylor wore a $2 million custom Valentino gown, and Fortensky traded his work boots for a designer tuxedo. The ceremony drew celebrities from every corner of the industry, and the couple sold the photos to People, donating the proceeds to AMFAR, the AIDS charity co-founded by Taylor. Yet the glittering fantasy couldn't survive real life. After 5 years, the marriage ended, leaving Taylor once again to navigate love, loss, and the glare of the public eye. Even as her romantic life twisted and turned like a Hollywood plot, another connection quietly endured, one that was never about status or tabloid headlines. Rock solid, the bond that defied Hollywood. In 1956, Giant hit theaters and instantly became a sensation, raking in 7 times its budget and snagging 7 Oscar nominations, including a win for Best Director. The film would forever be remembered as James Dean's final work, though he never saw its release, having tragically died in September 1955. But beyond the accolades, Giant brought together 2 acting legends, Elizabeth Taylor and Rock Hudson. On the film's set in Marfa, Texas in 1955, the two met and quickly forged a bond that would last over 3 decades. Hudson had just married Phyllis Gates, his agent's secretary, a union meant to shield the truth of his homosexuality. A truth known to insiders but taboo in the rigid world of mid-century Hollywood. On warm Texan nights, the quiet streets echoed with laughter, whispers, and the clink of margarita glasses as these 2 stars discovered a friendship that transcended the cameras and the limelight. Though both were famous in their own right, the depth of their connection became something extraordinary. On the set of Giant, Elizabeth and Rock became confidants, sharing their vulnerabilities in a world that demanded perfection. Taylor opened up about postpartum struggles and heartache, while Hudson carried the weight of a secret that haunted him for decades. The stoic, hard-working Rock found comfort in Elizabeth's warmth, her passion, and her ease with emotion, qualities that allowed him to drop the mask he'd worn his whole life. Their homes, set across the street from one another near the filming location, became a nightly refuge. Elizabeth would stroll over and the pair would spend hours in laughter, conversation, and playful mischief. She later recalled to biographer Mark Griffin, "Rock made me laugh. We spent most of the time laughing, chatting, and being silly. One night the hail was like golf balls and we were running out, getting bonked on the head, making chocolate martinis." Their personalities complemented one another perfectly. Elizabeth's joy and playfulness softened Rock's stoicism, while his calm steadiness grounded her fiery energy. They were companions in the truest sense, each finding in the other a kind of solace rare in Hollywood. Yet their story was not without heartbreak. In 1984, Rock received an AIDS diagnosis, a shadow that marked the final chapter of a friendship that had endured fame, secrets, and the relentless scrutiny of the world around them. After Rock's diagnosis, it was what Taylor said that still shocks people till this very day. But while the world focused on friendship and loss, Elizabeth's personal battles were quietly reaching a boiling point, a storm that would touch every corner of her life. Elizabeth's drug addiction. By 1982, Elizabeth Taylor's life had become a storm she could barely weather. Her marriage to Senator John Warner was unraveling, and the bright, glamorous screen icon found herself sinking under the weight of addiction. Pills and alcohol had taken over her days, with medical records revealing dosages so extreme that a doctor reviewing them assumed she must be dead. Between 1983 and 1988, 3 of her doctors wrote a combined 1,000 prescriptions for 28 different drugs, from tranquilizers to painkillers. Her drug use had grown so severe that her son's wife anonymously reported her overprescribing, sparking a realization of just how dangerously out of control things had become. At one low point, Taylor asked her son Christopher to inject her with the powerful synthetic opioid Demerol. When he found her sitting at the edge of her bed, already impaired, holding the syringe, she asked him to give her the shot. Christopher refused, but she looked at him with a mix of disappointment and resignation, steadied her hand, and injected herself. Her drinking had been worsening for years, fueled in part by her marriages, particularly the tempestuous union with Richard Burton, whose own alcoholism was legendary and often overshadowed her struggles. Alcohol, Brower writes, was the third partner in her marriage to Burton, and her own growing dependence was easy to overlook. Her time as a senator's wife in Washington brought new pressures: boredom, isolation, and the slow accumulation of weight and dissatisfaction. She later reflected that the lifestyle had turned her into a drunk and a junkie. By 1981, she was divorced and back in Los Angeles, but her addiction to pills only intensified. Surrounded by assistants and housekeepers who treated her indulgences as normal, she manipulated doctors into giving her what she wanted, when she wanted it. She rationalized the pills as legitimate because they were prescribed, even as the problem continued to spiral. Interventions eventually became inevitable. In 1983, a group of friends and family staged one that sent her to the Betty Ford Center for a 7-week stay. She stopped drinking but clung to the pills, refusing to give them up entirely. She later restricted phone calls after 9 p.m., not because she was asleep, but because she was under the influence. At one point, she was asked to leave rehab for refusing to cooperate. And again in 1988, after a second intervention, she left because she would not follow the program. Amid the chaos, love found her in the unlikeliest place: rehab. Taylor met construction worker Larry Fortensky, 20 years her junior, and eventually married him in a spectacular ceremony in 1991. But even that marriage was not immune to the turbulence of her life. 5 years later, the pressures and old patterns returned, and the couple split. For the rest of her life, Taylor battled her addictions, navigating the thin line between glamour and self-destruction. She never fully escaped her demons, yet she endured, surviving decades of excess, heartbreak, and public scrutiny, leaving behind a legacy as dazzling and complicated as the jewels she loved. Before her death, Elizabeth Taylor confessed the truth about Rock Hudson. Before Rock Hudson's death in 1985, Elizabeth Taylor carried a truth that few in Hollywood dared to speak aloud. She had always known about Rock's a secret in an era when revealing it could destroy careers and invite danger. As his longtime friend and confidant, she understood the stakes, and when Rock was diagnosed with AIDS, she faced the devastating reality head-on, quietly supporting him while the world remained unaware. By 1985, Rock became one of the first major celebrities to disclose his AIDS diagnosis, opening himself to speculation, scrutiny, and judgment. Even as he traveled abroad seeking treatments that might slow the disease's progression, Elizabeth stayed close in spirit. When he returned to Los Angeles on July 30, 1985, he was flown by helicopter to UCLA Medical Center, spending about a month under intensive care. Elizabeth, knowing where he was, worked with his doctor to see him privately, keeping the encounter hidden from the relentless media. She worried about his fragile state, unsure if hugging or touching him might do harm, yet Rock welcomed her presence with relief, grateful for a familiar face in the storm. The weight of his illness hit Elizabeth hard. She had spent her life surrounded by the friends she loved and trusted, and suddenly the people she cared about most were being targeted, feared, and vilified. She knew she could not stay silent. Visiting Rock in the hospital, they laughed about lighter times, the chocolate martinis, the afternoons in Marfa, Texas, the carefree summer nights where life had seemed simple. Even in that stark hospital room, flashes of the playful, vibrant man she had always known surfaced. But the disease had taken its toll. The last time she saw him, he barely recognized her. The very next day, the news she dreaded arrived. Rock Hudson had died at 59. Determined to honor him in the way they had shared joy, Elizabeth arranged a memorial at his Beverly Hills home, complete with mariachis and margaritas, a playful nod to the afternoons they had spent laughing together in Marfa. His death ignited a mission that would define the rest of her life. That same year, she co-founded the Foundation for AIDS Research, AMFAR, and in 1991 she established the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation. She dedicated herself to care, advocacy, and fighting the stigma that had shadowed the epidemic, giving a voice to the vulnerable in a world that had often ignored them. Elizabeth Taylor had always been larger than life, but it was her love for Rock Hudson and the courage she found in facing tragedy that revealed her deepest strength. She stepped forward not just as a Hollywood icon, but as a protector and truth-teller, transforming heartbreak into purpose and showing that loyalty and love could reach far beyond the silver screen. What are your thoughts on Elizabeth Taylor and Rock Hudson's relationship? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.